Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode here at Bulletproof Selling. My name is Sean Rhodes, and I'm the Chief Sales Sergeant here at Bulletproof Selling and author of the book Bulletproof Selling, a guide for systemizing sales on the battlefield of business. Now, over the course of 90, close to 100 episodes now, we've been here every week, sometimes multiple times a week, to help you accomplish one thing, and that is to remove hope from your sales strategy. My background as a war correspondent embedded inside the U.S. Marine Corps, got to work with a lot of combat units over the years, taught us that hope doesn't work on the battlefield. And if you're in sales, you're on the battlefield of business. So we are here to help you peel that back. Now, what do you replace hope with? Well, systems. So since day one here at Bulletproof Selling, we've been bringing on experts in sales systems, people that were leading sales teams, Hall of Fame speakers, best-selling authors, folks that were out there helping sales teams develop and stand up systems. Because believe it or not, I learn just as much from my guests as any of my listeners. And that's why I love having these conversations. So when I run into somebody that is already embedded in the world of sales systems, just like I was embedded in those combat units, I know we're going to have a great time. Now, think of all the places that I've gotten to live over the years, 24 countries. The spot that really has probably the most of my heart is this little mountain town in Western North Carolina. Now, it's not particularly known for sales systems. It's not particularly known as a tech space, but the natural beauty there, the quality of the people there, really can't be beat. So I want to welcome onto the show, coming from one of my favorite places in the whole world, Asheville, North Carolina, Mr. Jeremy Pope. Jeremy, welcome to Bulletproof Selling.
Oh, I'm a mister now. All right.
Yeah.
I'll take it. Thank you
I'll
for
call
having
you.
me.
I'll call you sir as well if you like, but we will have a good time regardless, man. So, for the folks that weren't able to catch your bio before the show, tell us a little bit about your sales journey. I know you didn't drop into the spot you're at now, so help us understand a little bit of the winding road that you had to take to end up where you are, helping other teams build systems for themselves.
Sure. My sales path started in my dropout year of college, which was coincidentally my only year of college. But I was selling door to door in South Georgia, wearing a tie and coat in the hot sun, because summer's
Mm-hmm.
9 months long in Georgia, of
Oh
course,
yeah.
to attorneys. So I was selling real estate paralegal services to attorneys, and not good at it. I mean, I made it work, but I was not particularly good at it. And it was not until I got into NLP and hypnosis and started, I was a clinical hypnotist for 10 years. And it wasn't until I really got into that for a couple of years that I learned how to sell very effectively and learned how to listen properly. So that was what got me into selling, just working for myself my entire adult life, I've been selling something. And then I've been doing sales training of some sort or another since 2005. So for 17 years. And the people that I tend to work with now, the very small business owners, the agency owners, course creators, experts, SAAS founders in that online startup arena, I guess you could call it.
Mm-hmm.
I got into that specifically in 2016, working as a client success director for a successful coaching company in that arena, and have been kind of focused on this crowd ever since. It's been a lot of
I think
fun.
of a lot of small business owners, because I am one, so I understand how this was in the early days of business. They don't know anything about sales because they've never had to work in a sales team before. They're
Yeah.
coming from some other type of corporate gig. They've got a passion in their heart. They want to help the world in some way with a product or a service or a mixture of both. And then
Yeah.
you have new salespeople, folks that are new to an industry. They're working with a lot of support behind them. I find they have a lot of similar challenges, but I'm curious to get your perspective on. Is
Agreed.
there so okay? Glad we agree on that. That's the first thing we're going to agree on. I want to dig deeper though. What is the top challenge that you find these people are really butting up against? Is it just closing deals? Is it understanding what the heck it is to have a sales cycle? Because we start from the ground up. What are those things that you find people are really lacking when they either begin a business, need to know how to sell, or they're starting on a sales team without a lot of external support to show them the way?
I think probably the biggest thing that gets people tripped up on a semi-permanent basis inside their heads is, what is lead qualification?
Hmm.
there are so many false beliefs that you can accidentally build, because who knows what examples you've had throughout your life or throughout your business life uh, about, am I even talking to the right person? And so it's very easy to, as a dear friend and another sales trainer, Jason Canigan, he calls it contortions. So we get contorted around some element that doesn't really even need to be in our environment. And it creates all these false beliefs, and it creates all kinds of identity shifts that may not be very healthy. And I think there are any number of things that can create that sort of twistiness internally. But am I talking to a qualified person? And how do I know when I'm talking to a qualified person? I think that's one of probably the three biggest things that gets to people.
You think of all of the things that knowing you're talking to a qualified person does for you as a salesperson. And obviously, there's the confidence, knowing that you're at least pointing yourself in the right direction.
Yeah.
We had an analogy in the military. You never wanted to take a whole bunch of junior people and just say, go attack something, because they will, but it probably won't be the target that you want them to attack.
Yeah.
You actually have to have focus. So it gives
Yep.
us focus, but it also helps us overcome something that I find a lot of salespeople at any stage in their career struggle with, because I know I do still here more than a decade into my sales career, and that's call reluctance. If I'm just smiling and dialing and I'm not certain if the person on the other end of the line can even buy from me, boy, that just makes me want to do anything else but pick up the phone or go visit, where they're at physically. So when we talk about qualifying, I'd love to get your experience on how does that play into the psychology of call reluctance, or do you see call reluctance as really being like because I can tell you're thinking in this way already. Is it the mark of a deeper psychological twisting up, this idea of call reluctance or of sales reluctance in general?
I think it can be. I'm not sure that it has to be. I'd have to spend some time on that, but it's definitely got comorbidities. So if we look at call reluctance alongside, am I any good at this? And lawyers just don't have any money. Financial advisors are just stingy. Chief product officers only ever want to save a buck. I mean, there any form of that. My industry doesn't have money, or my industry is stingy, or something along those lines. There are a lot of beliefs that go along with that, but there are a few beliefs that can make up call reluctance, and it could be an internal thing, or it could be an external thing, or it could be a very external thing, just like a bad process. I've got a bad process, and so it's no fun to run my own process. And so why am I even in this career? It can come from a lot of places, but yeah, I think a lot of things will manifest as call reluctance. Yeah, now that I think about it.
And in the idea of mindset being probably the most critical thing in sales, because I've had them. I've had the best leads in the world. You call this person, Sean, they know you're going to call. They are qualified. They have budget. All you got to do is close the deal. But I wasn't in the right mindset, and I can promise I screwed those calls up. So it doesn't matter how qualified they are. If our mindset isn't there, it's not going to go well. So from your background as a clinical hypnotist, that's the correct term, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is it about the self-limiting beliefs that we might have at any stage of our sales career that could really screw us up in mindset? How do we identify those? And we could talk about solving them, but I'm just curious to know, how do I know that a problem I'm having is coming from a self-limiting belief rather than an external, objectively verified reality?
Yeah. You have to get outside feedback. There is very little, we only have our five senses to perceive things with. Even God is perceived through our five senses if you have a relationship with God. And this is how we are set up. We don't have any other tools available to us except for the meta senses like proprioception, and some people count 28 with all that. But so we've got these five basic tools, and if we can't get out of that box of our own senses, our own perception, we don't have a chance. So you have to get a way to get objective about this. You have to build a way to become objective about this. The easiest way is sales coaching, or peer coaching or some kind of coaching where someone has insight into the things that you don't necessarily want them to have insight into, and you've given them permission to speak into that area.
That's tough when we're opening up our pipeline or our book of
Yeah.
business to someone who's doing better than us. I mean, you probably don't want to get advice from somebody who's worse off than you are, but then to be able to be vulnerable and open and honest. And I get to do this as well with groups of peers that I have, and
Yeah.
it's painful
You
on my
have
part
to, but
every
it's
single
it's
time.
painful. Yeah. Yep.
I love it.
Even
So
for those of us
yeah.
that practice this constantly, we still have to psych ourselves up to role plays and all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Otherwise, how do we know if we're getting better? So this
Yeah.
idea of self-limiting beliefs, because this is something that I see a lot of salespeople struggle with. I want to dive
Mhm.
deeper into that. Could it happen anywhere in the sales cycle, or do you find that once you hit a certain stage with a prospect, they're qualified? You've talked about budget. The self-limiting beliefs kind of
Mm.
dissipate or go away, or can it
No,
continue
it's
all the way
anywhere.
to anywhere? Really? Okay,
Yeah.
interesting.
It depends on what you're dealing with
Mm,
specifically, because they could pop up at any point. There is, and it can come up for non-sale related reasons as well. Um, anyone coming from the therapy world or the counseling world may have heard of the Karpman drama triangle: persecutor, rescuer, victim.
hmm,
And so all three positions are unhealthy, obviously, and ineffective. They don't do what you intend for them to do, but people will choose a role to play because they think it's going to get them what they want. They're inherently manipulative. All three positions
hmm,
are inherently manipulative. And Stockholm syndrome is another like sneaky manipulative kind of thing. We use Stockholm syndrome to manipulate a captor or
sure.
to try and stay safe or things like that.
Hmm.
So they're unhealthy, they're maladaptive, but they come from a good place. Like they come from a place of needing something that's perfectly valid, and it's on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I mean, we need these things on the
Hmm.
pyramid and we move up to the next thing, and et cetera. But that self-sabotage can pop up at any point in the process, at any point in a conversation, even.
Mm,
So
that's really interesting. That's and
I have found it
yeah,
fascinating. Yeah.
it because I'm thinking of all the sales conversations I've had, and obviously, if we get down to the end of a sale, ink is about to get on paper, we can still
Mhm.
sabotage. We may not recognize it as self
Oh,
sabotage,
yeah.
but if there's any feeling inside of me like I'm not good enough or I don't deserve this deal, or a lot of salespeople these days, how am I going to deliver on this thing when 9 months worth of supply chain shortages are going to delay delivery of this, and I've got
Yeah.
to help navigate the customer through that for the next 9 months, even though they're inking paper today.
Yeah.
All of those things can come to play. So I'm curious to get your insight. Then, where do you see salespeople relying on hope in their sales strategy when really it's a self-limiting belief problem that they might actually have? I might hope that these people get back to me. I might hope these emails come back. I might hope that folks accept meetings with me if I just, say like this standard LinkedIn message that drives me up a wall. "Hey, would you like to get together for 15 minutes? You don't know anything about me, but I want some of your time," offering nothing of value.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of places in a sales cycle things could go wrong. But where
Yeah.
does self-limiting beliefs actually hold the power over those issues rather than just poor process?
I'm not sure I could say it's rather than. I
Hmm.
think they all play together in such intertwined ways that I don't know that you can address one effectively without addressing the rest.
Hmm.
Um, the a lot of the hope that I see in salespeople and sales managers and founders — I deal with a lot of small founders — is they hope that their leads are qualified, for instance,
Hmm.
because they don't trust their system to tell them if the
Gotcha.
leads are qualified. They hope that they're talking to the right person, or anything. It's not just that topic, not just
Yeah.
that qualification issue. Um, they hope that this person is ready to buy because they don't have a system, a call structure inside their call to know whether
Hmm.
someone is ready to buy. They hope that they're not going to get objections because they haven't dealt with the objections. And
Hmm.
so when you can't trust your system, when you can't trust your sales ops, when you can't trust your follow-up process, when you can't trust your scripting or your word tracks or your call flow or whatever your company does, then you have to hope. Because I mean, what are you going to do without that? So hope is better than despair, but it certainly should never be anything other than an intermediate step on the way to certainty.
To rely on hope isn't going to get us our goals.
Right.
And I see a lot of,
That's like Rick Page's book. Hope is not a strategy. I mean, it's just not.
On the inside of Bulletproof Selling, big letters, we put that hope is not a sales strategy.
Nice,
yeah.
Nice. As soon as you started talking about hope and strategy, I'm like, oh, I bet he's a Page fan as well.
Yeah, and so the idea of lead generation, then, this is something that a lot of salespeople think only belongs on the cold qualification part of a sales cycle.
Right.
I don't know anything about them; they don't know anything about me. But I've dealt with accounts long enough where I had to requalify them.
Yeah.
After a year or 2 years or 5 years or 10 years, because maybe they're in a different line of business or they have a vendor that they're never going to leave that I have no wish to try to unseat. There's a variety of reasons that I need to requalify accounts. So when we talk about lead qualification, it's not something that just applies to brand new accounts. It's something that has to be done and redone over the length of time that someone is in that customer cycle for you. So let's
I think emotional qualification, like getting buy-in in a call, can be thought of as the same process, just in micro rather than in macro. Yeah. If we start talking about the banked or BANT plus challenges, so banked, if we're doing that at every point, if we're gauging that at every point, and we have the tools to gauge that properly at every point, a lot of the folks that I work with, they have a very short sales cycle. So one or two calls can often do the trick. Or if we're dealing with a team with a longer sales cycle, a 6-month, 8-month sales cycle, we're going to do our best to reduce the length of that cycle down to the 2 or 3 month range, things like that. But a lot of that can be accelerated by listening well at the beginning. If somebody says to you, I feel stuck. No, I don't feel stuck, but you know what I mean. I'm like, they feel stuck in their heads. They used a feeling word. I know the metaphor they're using in their head. Yep. They're chained down or they're in a tar pit or something like that. I'm going to go hard on that metaphor with them. Why would I make them translate into my language when I already have heard their language? I'm just going to use that. If I can do that in my head, if I can understand what they're doing in their heads, why would I do anything but that? They already speak Italian. I speak bad Italian, but let's do that instead of forcing them to speak almost no English. Like, let's make it easy for them. And if you do that, then you get the ability to gauge that budget, authority, need, challenges, timeline at almost every point in your sales cycle. And you can see where you can jump ahead and where you can ask a much, much deeper question than if you were following a more scripted process. It gives you the opportunity, it gives you the preparation to take advantage of the opportunities. So you get lucky a lot with sales cycle acceleration when you're listening. Almost literally, it's not quite the right word, but when you're listening in a very pragmatic and tactical way.
And I love the idea of tactical, because what you're talking about there is lead qualification, but also doing it by your prospect's terms, doing it through their lens, instead of trying to qualify them into your strict set of, here are the 8 things I need to know to move this deal forward, to actually listen and learn while you're qualifying, which can vastly accelerate a sales cycle. I've seen it done. So, Jeremy, let's build a sales system around this, because it's an issue that we've never quite touched on here at Bulletproof Selling. When we talk about systems, we've used the same things that I saw troops do on the battlefield. We had to take these 18 and 19-year-olds and spin them up very quickly in things that were going to save their lives. So how do you do that? Through great training, through repeatable systems. And instead of forcing these men and women to march in lockstep, which people think that's all the military is about, so everybody do the same thing, it actually allowed them to know what was going to come next in a given situation, so that they could back up and they could actually innovate, they could respond, and and all of the things that they need to do to survive. So we think about systems, and Anthony is coming to us from LinkedIn. Anthony, absolutely, it'll be available right here on LinkedIn. through the end of the recording so you'll be able to see it again. I digress though, Jeremy. Just want to make sure we're taking care of our people they're watching.
Mhm.
The idea of a system, then I need to know when to pull this thing off the shelf. So we talked about qualification happening not just at the beginning of a sales cycle, but maybe it has to happen throughout as well. If this account is rested for a while, they weren't ready last time.
Mhm.
So when do I need to trigger a discovery process where I'm really doing it in a way that allows me to get inside of my client's world? Does that happen before I reach out? Does that happen while I'm on the phone with them? When does this system need to trigger?
As early as possible.
Okay.
Um, and possible is probably earlier than you thought.
Mm.
But it depends on the industry. It so depends on the industry. I'm dealing with a software company right now that we can get to people on LinkedIn and we can find useful things out about them on LinkedIn. And that is not the case with 90% of my clients.
Gotcha.
So it really depends. As far as an account resting, I'm not sure I can speak to that with great authority. But the times when I would trigger a reevaluation or a discovery process, yeah. I think the reason I'm having trouble with that is because I'm always doing qualification. Like
It never stops for you.
That's my secret, Captain. I'm always qualifying.
Yeah. Okay.
Some people are always be closing. I'm always be qualifying. And yes, there is a disqualification element to that, but I'm really big on what I call honest outs. So I hate manipulative questions like well, is Tuesday or Thursday better for you?
Mm-hmm.
What if neither? That, like, everybody sees you coming with that kind of thing. And so honest outs, when I stop and Chris Voss's labeling tactic, it sounds like you might be skeptical about X, that kind of thing. That's one form of an honest out. But asking questions that are just very direct, very almost vulnerable. Vulnerable might be the word that I'm looking for there. And we see this from the Sandler sales training as well. If you feel something, say something that, oh, I'm feeling a lot of pressure right now. Am I doing something weird on this call? Or are you feeling that? Things like that. Giving people honest outs so that, and Sandler has its own manipulation stuff going on, of course. There's a lot of Columbo, like playing dumb in Sandler, and you don't have to go that far, although they have a lot of good structures. When you never stop qualifying, though, it means you don't have to figure out when to stop and restart. Now, how often should you be following up in your nurture process? What is your nurture process?
That's a whole separate conversation.
Yeah.
So let's. I want to make sure that I hyper focus this on qualifying.
Okay.
So the trigger element in this, it sounds like every conversation. This is actually part of a longer acronym, not long, but it's 4 letters long, TRIM, because we had to figure out in the military, turning anything into an acronym saved us a little bit of time, assuming we knew what the acronym meant. So here at Bulletproof Selling, we think of system building for sales, that this acronym TRIM, T is the trigger. So we've gotten that out of the way. But now to make it repeatable, so that I have a basic maybe 4 or 5 steps that I walk through on every sales call, because it sounds like every time I have a conversation in your world, I'm qualifying, even if just a little bit. So what are the 4 or 5 things that I can do repeatedly on every call to qualify or requalify this prospect?
Yeah. Well, keep in mind that we've got the CBANT or banked or whatever. So I call those external qualifiers. And then you've got the internal qualifiers, the emotional state. And where is this person right now? I cannot tell you how many times I've seen a prospect lose the fire. You thought they were going to be a strong internal champion for you at their company, like a challenger customer, but they've lost the fire. They've gotten distracted. I mean, sometimes it's that simple. They just got distracted, the thorny soil kind of thing. And requalifying them emotionally, so you know where your starting point is on this call, is a really important thing, and being able to be flexible around that.
What's an example of what that sounds like?
Oh, when we go into a call and someone is hesitating just a little bit, they do not sound as enthusiastic. That is the easiest thing. Just how enthusiastic do they sound?
Mm.
Do they sound bought in? And if we're on Zoom, then we can read body language. Do they look bought in? How many times have they glanced at their phone or at Slack or things like that?
Mm-hmm.
There are all kinds of little signals that you can use, but I'd say most of it is the nonverbals. That's really what I'm going after. But then what are the metaphors that they're using? I go deep on the metaphors. That comes from my clinical hypnosis background. I mean, I was trained real thoroughly to dive in there. You can hear the metaphors I'm using right there. Dive in, right? Go deep, etc. So when you have the tools to visualize someone else's emotional state and their present state, their future state, Keenan calls it gap selling. So like stretch that gap out. I like that. I like that a lot. So I'm really feeling my way through a lot of these things. And the body language stuff, you can teach it in very mechanical ways. It is not, it's not mystical, or you don't have to have 10 years of training or just be a hypersensitive person to this stuff. My people, a lot of the language that I use is things like givers stuck in a taker process.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of my people do tend to be pretty sensitive to the emotional stuff once they let themselves be.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So I don't have to teach around this as much as I might with some other audiences. Like if I were teaching the sales engineering crowd, I don't deal with sales engineers a lot. And toward the beginning of their career, they tend to advance really quickly, emotional EQ wise. But toward the beginning of a sales engineer's career, or an engineer who's just moving into that, they might not pick up on the body language. They might not pick up on where someone is. And so it's just very easy to run over someone. But the repetition that I do is, I think it's mostly in the form of stopping to check in. I do a lot of that. And a fair amount of it is affected by my personal style. And that's not necessary for everybody. Everybody's going to have their own style of doing it. I don't want to replicate me. There's one chief potato officer, and that's me. Yeah. So we don't need more clowns like me out there. But everybody's got a style that's going to fit into this. And if you're stopping to check in, then you're going to do pretty well. In the nurture process, in the discovery process outside of the call, like macro to the call, just make sure you never say check in.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. Yeah, don't use those words. And so it obviously, body language, critically important. Yeah. I've even seen this done where you could only be on the phone and the person sounds really irritated, agitated. Yeah. And you don't know if it's probably not to do with you. I always remember Don Miguel Ruiz's, first, it's probably don't take it personal, whatever you do. Maybe it's not you. It might be you though. And so one, thing from the personal development world I've seen work well is to literally say on the phone, I'm going to de-roll myself from being a salesperson at XYZ company. It sounds like there's a lot going on over there. What's happening with you?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And then just give them an opportunity, a space to open up. And even the most hard-nosed, blue collar, their boots are covered in mud all day. Say that to them, give them an opportunity to just voice what's going on. Yep. I guarantee they're going to tell you something that is going to help with your sales cycle. So I love the idea of this trigger element. We've got making it repeatable, which are some steps that are not, here's how to check this in your CRM, which is what most of our systems are based on. This is a lot more EQ. It's a lot more what's going on internally in order to qualify this person as still being engaged in the process.
Right.
And of course, all of the regular things we know to do. You still the decision maker at whatever company. Are you still controlling budget? Your unique ways of asking that depending on your industry. So trigger, repeatable, done. Now, the ion trim is making this thing improvable. We realized in the
Yeah.
military that our enemy, in this case, it's the apathy of our prospects, our competition, their ignorance around what we do or how we differentiate. That's the enemy in a sales world. Our enemy is going to adapt to what we're doing. The market's going to adapt. The economy is going to change. Recessions are going to come and go. So I have to change what I'm doing. What am I going to do to improve how I'm qualifying in this way, Jeremy, so that I make sure I'm keeping up to date with what's going on?
The absolute number one thing that I've ever found is record your calls. This is possible in every state in the union when you're on Zoom, because the little red light is on. They are notified. They are aware. Sure. Everybody knows what the little red light means. You are golden. There's no state that's going to give you problems when they know.
You can also record, I understand, just my side of the call in any state of the union as well, right? The thing. No, you can't. The things that are coming out of just my mouth.
There are 11 states that are dual party consent states. And
even just to record your side of the call.
So one party consent states, you can always record your side of the call.
Yeah, that's yeah.
Right.
That's what I mean.
But dual party consent states, those 11, they're a little trickier. Yeah. They have to be aware. They don't have to explicitly verbally consent to it, but they have to know it's being recorded in some way or another, unless, let's see, it's CCD.
Well, I don't want to go too deep down that path.
Okay.
Consult your legal team. Long story short.
Right.
But I'm curious to know then if I can record my calls again.
And you almost always can. Yeah. There's always a way to make it happen somehow or another.
Yes. And at least my side. And I was doing that in the early days before I was using voice over internet protocols and all that fancy stuff. But at least to just hit record and just capture my side, because I really am more paying attention to what I'm saying.
Oh, I see what you mean. Like not even trying to get their half of the conversation into the recording. That always works. Yeah,
yes, always works. Yes, yes. So I'm curious, what am I listening for when I'm reviewing my calls?
Well, you are listening for, am I on system? That is the biggest thing. So am I following the process, and is my process good? So if you're off process, you don't have to try and improve the process. You have to try and get on process. That's it.
Yes, get on process first.
That's the number one thing. And then you work on improving the process. I cannot tell. This is something that a lot of salespeople may not experience a lot of. This is more of a founder thing. But if I told you how many of the, I don't know, couple hundred founders that I've coached in the last couple of years have come to me saying, I think it's the offer. I need to change my offer. You would be shocked. You'd be shocked, because maybe twice a year, founders go through this offer crisis where something is not working well, and they're going into that Dunning-Kruger valley of despair phase where the confidence goes up really high, and then it goes down as they get into, oh, this is actually hard, like anything else in life. And then they slowly start to build back up their competence and their confidence and their results and all their leading indicators, but they're still in leading indicator territory, not lagging indicator territory, syllable territory. Goodness. Yeah. And so when they crash down into that valley of despair, they go for the offer because it's easy to tweak. It's easy to, I should pivot. Oh, we should do something else. I mean,
everything surrounding the offer, is that actually being followed? Are you gathering the things that you say you need to gather, checking the things you say you need to check? Yeah. So I love the idea of call recording and making sure that you're at least on system. Now, the M on trim is the last piece, and it's to make this thing measurable.
Yes.
Because if I've taken the time to do this, I'm taking the time to say, I'm not just going to bang, 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 bang with my discovery questions. We're going to step back. We're going to create a safe emotional space. These words hurt me to say sometimes, Jeremy, because of my background. Emotions are not really something we involve a lot of in the military, but I know how critical it is to actually enjoy life as a salesperson. So I'm deeply invested in them now. But if I'm taking the time to do this, means I'm taking the time away from other activity. I could be making more calls if I'm not spending as much time requalifying you in a way that actually pays attention to how you're feeling. So what am I measuring to make sure that this is a system worth continuing, or if I should just go back to doing things the way I was doing them before?
You're asking a lot of questions that I don't have ready answers for. So sorry
That's
for all
why
these
you're
long
here.
pauses.
No, I'm putting you on the spot every single one of them. Absolutely.
These are fun. These are really fun, but they're making me
Yeah.
think.
Good. So, I mean, you think about measuring in sales, right? Should we just
Yeah.
be measuring lagging indicators, closed deals? Because
No,
I should be closing more deals,
no.
but should it be leading indicators or a mixture?
I can answer that easily. So
Okay.
I'm looking at my screen right here where I've got a page worth of bullet points of how to build a good KPI. Like I was just journaling about this yesterday because I'm going to do a training on it Wednesday with my private clients. And so I believe that so many people try and use somebody else's KPIs and it doesn't work for them. And so there are some things that are fairly universal and I'm comfortable saying, okay, aim at this. But it's very easy to create a bad or to assume a bad KPI. It's not actually K. There's nothing key about this performance indicator.
Yes. It's just
it might not even indicate
tracking.
anything except random data.
Yeah.
So you have to have your data collection system set up properly for one thing. So sometimes that could be call recordings or note taking. Like those are data collection processes, systems, if you will. And then store them in a way where you can get to that information at the times you need it. This goes back into sales ops and all that stuff. But when you have the data to work with, then it makes everything else easier. So what are the KPIs for your company? You know that you have to speak with enough, whatever enough is, qualified, whatever qualified is, leads. Okay, I don't think we have to define that word, but you know what a lead is for you. And then once you've got those pieces in play, like don't let your confidence take a hit if you're speaking with one person a week and a reasonable amount of data through the system is 14. Or if you've got a quota as an SDR of 2 qualified meetings per month or per quarter at some companies, and you're not getting pickups, or I mean, if some part of the system ahead of where you're trying to measure isn't working, you cannot measure the current the part that you care about emotionally.
Right,
The part
you're playing an active role in. Yeah.
Right.
And so I'm curious then
if
if
sure
we're
that the
dealing
previous
with
pieces are working.
So if we're diving in the qualification piece then, because I want to make sure that this at least accelerates my velocity inside my pipeline in some measure, right? If I'm actually taking the time to listen, requalifying, what I learned from the qualification then has to affect something down the road as far as sales. And it might be driving meetings faster or more meetings or increasing engagement. What am I paying attention to that is on the data side or the prospect side to make sure that this system is actually generating something in a positive direction?
Oh, well, engagement.
Okay.
Are we, as long as you're asking good questions in your process, whether that's in your marketing material and your application process, whatever hoops people are jumping through to get to you, if any, and in your discovery process, I mean, discovery is all the way through until this client has finished their fulfillment process. They're no longer referring anyone else to you. It's like discovery happens long after separation.
After the sale. Yeah. I love it.
Yeah. So as long as you are discovering well, then you're going to know if you're talking to the right people or not. It's very hard to miss that. And are they engaging? And does someone outside of your head, this could be another salesperson on your team, it could be your sales manager, it could be a coach, it could be a peer, somebody else who has enough data to work with this equation without being colored by your own feelings. They need to be outside your feelings is what it is.
Gotcha.
If they can look at that and go, oh no, that's not actual engagement. They accidentally pulled the wool over your eyes without even realizing they did it here. You didn't go deep enough with this question. And so you got a mushy answer and you don't know what that answer means. That happens a lot. So Once you get your questions to the point where you're not getting mushy answers anymore, then it's hard to miss the leading indicator signals of where are we on this.
So I'd love the measurement, and then part of that, getting that external validation on your
Yeah.
data.
There's one other thing that I believe is very important. I say a lever is not a club, a lot. And if you've got a fulcrum that you build, that you get buy-in with, that fulcrum is buy-in. If you get buy-in from any prospect or anyone you're trying to motivate, whether it's a kid, a spouse, a manager, an employee, a prospect, as long as you build the buy-in with them and you know you've got it, you're paying enough attention to know that you've got buy-in, then you have permission to do a lot of things that the other salesperson that they're talking to at your competitor is not going to be allowed to do unless they know to do this, unless they're doing the same thing, obviously. Mm-hmm. But if you ask them, hey, I want to get your opinion on this in 3 weeks and hear where you are in 3 weeks. Can we talk in 3 weeks? Not to push, but for me to listen. I want to come back and hear. Is that something we can spend 4 minutes on 3 weeks from now? Things like that. That would be a very unusual way of approaching that, but it's perfectly valid. There are any number of ways that you can build buy-in to stay in somebody's face. So, I mean, top of mind awareness is going to be very important with a longer sales cycle. And when you have permission to ask hard questions, that gives you not just the acceleration like we talked about, but it gives you the ability to get leading indicators that other salespeople may not even have access to.
The purpose of this whole method of qualification is to give you permission to ask the hard questions.
Yeah.
Which reveals more, gets you further in the pipeline. I love it, man. I love it. So I want to make sure salespeople have an opportunity to get out there and use this. Is everything that we do, try to make it in small enough chunks that they can take it into the field today. So complete sales system end to end on a unique method of making sure that your qualification lasts the length of your sales cycle. Because everything we're talking about can be done at any point. So Jeremy, for anybody interested in getting deeper into your world, learning more about you, getting into your content, how do they find you? Where do they go? How do they get access to you?
One place, salescalloverhaul.com/resources. Anything that they've heard me use weird phrasing around, I'm building a resource around that thing. We're branding that phrasing or whatever. So we'll have resources there. That's where the podcast will be as soon as we launch that, where we rebuild broken sales calls on the air.
Ooh, that'll be fun.
Oh, I'm so looking forward to it. I've even got the silly voices ready to go for reenactment as the prospect and as the salesperson. So people send in their recorded sales calls. We transcribe it, redact it, and then reenact the 4 or 5 big trouble spots on the air with the fixes right there on the air.
You're going to keep yourself busy for a couple of years doing that.
Because
I've done it. There's a lot to that. I love it, man. Well, make sure that you follow Jeremy then. We'll make sure that stuff's in the show notes so you can click right on it. And for us here at Bulletproof Selling, make sure you're following us on LinkedIn and, of course, on YouTube, our YouTube channel, where every single one of these conversations are archived. Live streams with the most brilliant people in the world in sales. How could you beat that? And of course, if you're listening to us, you're on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify. Please make sure that you're leaving the podcast a review. We'd love that. It would definitely help get more people on board with this idea that we can remove hope from how we sell. So for more sales systems to help you replace hope with certainty, bulletproofselling.us, where every single one of these systems is transcribed and archived for you to immediately be able to use. Sean Rhodes here. It's been a pleasure serving the sales community alongside you, Jeremy. Let's get out there and make selling bulletproof.